GhastlyGarlic Episode 41. Ghost Festival, The Haunting of Paper Souls. Prologue, The Whisper of the Past. In the depths of China's ancient mountains, where mist clings to the trees like the breath of spirits, there is a tale whispered among the elders, a tale of paper and souls, of life and death entwined. Long ago, in a time when the boundaries between the living and the dead were thinner than they are today, there lived an artisan whose hands could coax life from the most delicate of materials. He was known simply as the paper sage, a master of zhizha, the intricate art of crafting paper effigies. His work was unparalleled, his creations so lifelike that they seemed ready to step out of their frames and join the world of the living. But the paper sage's talent was not merely a gift, it was a curse. For with each stroke of his brush, with each fold of the paper, he unknowingly wove threads of his own soul into his creations. The spirits of the dead, drawn to the warmth of his soul, began to take refuge within the hollow shells he fashioned. At first, they were silent, content to dwell in the delicate forms that the sage had crafted with such care. But as time passed, the spirits grew restless. They were trapped between worlds, bound to the paper forms that held them captive. They whispered to the sage in the dead of night, their voices like the rustling of dry leaves, begging for release. The sage, blinded by his pride and consumed by his art, ignored their pleas. He continued to create, oblivious to the dark forces he was unleashing. It was not long before the whispers turned to screams. One fateful night, as the moon hung low and red in the sky, the paper sage's creations rose from their shelves. The spirits, driven mad by their imprisonment, took control of the effigies and sought vengeance on their creator. The town awoke to the sound of chaos, houses burned, crops withered, and the once peaceful village was plunged into a nightmare from which it would never fully awaken. The sage, realizing the horror he had wrought, tried desperately to undo his work. But it was too late. The spirits had grown too powerful, too angry. In a final act of desperation, the sage set fire to his workshop, hoping to cleanse the world of the monsters he had created. The flames consumed the building, and with it, the sage's life. Yet, even as the fire died, the legend did not. The story of the paper sage and his cursed creations was passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing with forces beyond human understanding. The villagers who survived vowed never to speak of zhizha again, and the art was lost to time, at least, that's what they hoped. But legends have a way of lingering, like smoke that clings to the air long after the fire has been extinguished. And in a remote town, far from the eyes of the world, a new generation of artisans began to practice the ancient craft, unaware of the darkness that still lurked in the folds of the paper, waiting to be unleashed once more. For the spirits of the dead do not rest easily, especially when they have been wronged. And those who dare to tread the path of the paper sage may find themselves haunted by more than just memories. Chapter 1: The Ghosts of Long Street. The story begins in the remote, fog-shrouded town of Long Street, nestled in the mountains of China. Wei Qing, now in his late 20s, returns to his hometown after several years in the city. Long Street has changed, its once vibrant community now overshadowed by an air of decay and neglect. Uncle Zhong's zhizha shop, once the heart of the town, now stands eerily silent, the intricate paper figures inside gathering dust. Wei recalls the fond memories of his childhood, especially the warmth and kindness of Uncle Zhong, who was like a grandfather to him. But the Uncle Zhong of today is a shadow of his former self, his once warm eyes now cold and distant. The villagers whisper that Uncle Zhong has become touched by the other side, avoiding his shop and crossing the street to avoid him. One night, as Wei lies awake, he hears strange sounds outside his window, whispers carried by the wind, footsteps that seem to echo unnaturally. He peers outside to see Uncle Zhong, moving stiffly down the street, his face pale and expressionless. There's something terribly wrong about the way he moves, as if his body is being controlled by unseen forces. This unsettling sight ignites Wei's curiosity and fear, compelling him to investigate what has happened to Uncle Zhong. Chapter 2: Midnight Whispers. Driven by a mix of concern and morbid curiosity, Wei decides to visit Uncle Zhong's shop during the day, but the visit only deepens his unease. The zhizha figures inside the shop seem unnaturally lifelike, their painted eyes gleaming with a strange, almost sentient intelligence. Uncle Zhong's behavior is even more disturbing. He speaks in short, cryptic phrases, his hands trembling as he works on a new effigy. Wei notices that Uncle Zhong never looks directly at him, and when their eyes do meet, Wei is struck by the depth of sadness and terror in the old man's gaze. As Wei leaves the shop, he can't shake the feeling that something is watching him. The sensation grows stronger as night falls, and Wei begins to experience vivid, terrifying nightmares of being chased through the darkened streets by shadowy figures. In these dreams, the zhizha figures come to life, their paper bodies moving with unnatural fluidity, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. One particularly disturbing night, Wei hears soft, eerie music drifting through his window, a mournful tune played on a traditional Chinese instrument. Drawn to the sound, Wei ventures outside and sees Uncle Zhong in the distance, playing the instrument as he walks. The music seems to beckon to Wei, pulling him towards the shop. When Wei arrives, he finds the shop door slightly ajar, and inside, the figures seem to be arranged differently, their heads all turned toward the door, as if waiting for him. Chapter 3: The Candlelit Horror. Despite his growing fear, Wei's determination to uncover the truth about Uncle Zhong only strengthens. He begins to delve into the town's history, discovering a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances linked to the shop. These events, stretching back decades, seem to suggest that the shop itself is cursed, and that Uncle Zhong may have inherited more than just the craft of zhizha from his ancestors. One night, Wei decides to confront his fears directly by visiting the shop after midnight. He prepares by carrying talismans and charms believed to ward off evil spirits. The night is eerily silent as Wei approaches the shop, the only sound being the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. When he enters the shop, the air is thick with the scent of incense and something foul, like rotting meat. Inside, the shop is dimly lit by flickering candles, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Wei's heart pounds as he notices that Uncle Zhong is nowhere to be seen. But then, from the corner of his eye, he sees movement. A zhizha figure, crafted in the likeness of a young woman, seems to shift slightly, its head tilting as if to watch him. Wei's terror mounts as he realizes that every figure in the room is subtly moving, their heads turning, their eyes following his every step. The air grows colder, and a low, almost inaudible hum begins to fill the room, a sound that seems to emanate from the zhizha figures themselves. Suddenly, the shop's back door creaks open, and Wei is drawn toward it, as if compelled by an unseen force. He descends a narrow, creaking staircase into the basement, where he finds Uncle Zhong sitting at a table, his back to Wei. The room is filled with even more zhizha figures, their faces grotesque and twisted. Uncle Zhong doesn't respond to Wei's presence, his gaze fixed on a candle burning on the table. Without warning, Uncle Zhong begins to speak in a low, hollow voice, revealing the horrifying truth. The zhizha figures are vessels for the souls of the dead, and Uncle Zhong has been binding these spirits to his creations for years. But the spirits have become restless, angry at being trapped in their paper prisons, and they now seek vengeance. As Uncle Zhong speaks, the zhizha figures in the room begin to twitch and move, their paper limbs rustling like dry leaves. Chapter 4: The Awakening of the Dead. Wei flees the basement in terror, but the nightmare has only just begun. Over the next few days, the town of Long Street is plagued by strange occurrences, unexplained fires, sudden deaths, and sightings of ghostly figures wandering the streets at night. The villagers are gripped by fear, whispering that the spirits have been unleashed and are now haunting the town. Wei's friends, skeptical at first, begin to believe his story as the supernatural events escalate. They rally together, seeking help from an old Taoist priest who lives in a nearby village. The priest warns that the spirits are powerful and that they are seeking revenge for their unjust imprisonment. He agrees to help, but only if Wei and his friends are willing to confront the spirits directly. As the group prepares for a final confrontation, Wei's nightmares become more intense, blurring the line between dream and reality. He dreams of being trapped in the shop, surrounded by the zhizha figures, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The spirits speak to him in these dreams, their voices a chorus of pain and anger, accusing Uncle Zhong of binding them to his creations. Chapter 5: The Ritual of Blood and Fire. The final chapter builds to a terrifying climax as Wei and his friends, guided by the Taoist priest, return to the zhizha shop to perform a ritual that will release the spirits and put an end to the curse. The ritual requires them to burn the zhizha figures in a sacred fire, but the spirits, now fully awakened, are determined to stop them. As the group begins the ritual, the zhizha figures come to life in a horrifying display, their paper bodies twisting and contorting as the spirits inside them struggle to break free. The shop itself seems to come alive, the walls closing in, the air thick with the stench of burning paper and flesh. The spirits manifest as ghostly apparitions, their faces twisted in agony, their voices filling the room with screams of rage. In a desperate battle, Wei and his friends fight to keep the sacred fire burning, fending off the spirits with the priest's talismans and incantations. The tension reaches its peak as the last of the zhizha figures is thrown into the fire, the spirit's screams reaching a deafening crescendo before finally being silenced. Epilogue. The epilogue takes place several months later. The town of Long Street is quiet once again, but the events of that night have left deep scars. The zhizha shop is boarded up, its windows covered in dust, and the villagers avoid even looking in its direction. Wei, now forever changed by the experience, reflects on the cost of the ritual, how it saved the town, but at a great personal cost. He carries the weight of what happened, haunted by the knowledge that the boundary between life and death is fragile, and that some spirits may never rest. As Wei walks through the now abandoned streets of Long Street, he hears the faint, familiar sound of soft, eerie music. He stops, his heart pounding, and turns to see a shadowy figure in the distance, an all-too-familiar silhouette slowly moving toward him. The story ends on a chilling note, with Wei realizing that the curse may not be over after all, leaving the reader with a sense of unfinished business, and an open-ended horror that lingers long after the final page is turned. The end.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. If you enjoyed our exploration of ghosts, mythical creatures, and urban legends, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling episodes. Until next time, my beloved listeners.